Hello everyone, welcome to my Last of Us Part 2, grounded difficulty, no damage, no crafting, no upgrades, no saves walkthrough, and this is Seattle Day 2 for Abby's section. And as you can tell, this is incredibly short, and this is a pretty easy act. Like I said before, Abby doesn't have to deal with a lot of bullcrap sections compared to Ellie. And as one of my subscribers described Abby's part of the game, Abby's easy mode. And I completely agree with my subscriber. I definitely feel like Abby's section of the game is a lot easier compared to Ellie's because she's not having to deal with a lot of really dumb sections. And they all feel really well designed. And speaking of the design, I have to actually talk about something once I get to one particular encounter in Seattle Day 2, because grounded difficulty has actually contributed to a positive change in one of the encounters. It's unbelievable. I gotta talk about it when I get to the encounter. But that right there, you gotta wait in that spot for a little bit and wait for the heavy to walk away, and then you need to wait for those two other enemies to start walking away, which will signal your chance to actually headshot that woman with the crossbow bolt. And skipping on ahead, we're moving on to this encounter right here, which, because I don't have a melee weapon, I can't actually melee this window while in the crouch position. I have to constantly stand up whenever I'm trying to melee this window, which is not what you want. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a brick there. Because I went through two windows, the distraction is over by that window, the second window that was broken. And I'm going to use another distraction to make sure that the rest of the enemies are hearing the distractions. And now's my chance to move because we're all in that general area, and it's a very simple encounter. I honestly question why this encounter is even in the encounter select. But moving on ahead, we now have this encounter that I wish was in the encounter select. And I wish it was in the encounter select because it's actually pretty challenging. Like 4 enemies, and you're in a pretty enclosed environment. And the good news is, when you restart the encounter, or even upon first starting the encounter, if you come over to this spot by using the dive to prone method, the enemies lose you very quickly. They can't seem to pinpoint your last on position right over here. And if you remain over by that desk to my left, the enemies are going to be aware of you for a very long time, and you just will not generate a lost on position very quickly. But just like in the school sequence for Ellie Day 1, where Dina could actually steal your cover, Lev does the same thing here, so always make sure that you're prone. That way he's not pushing you out of the cover and allowing you to be spotted by the enemies very easily. And this guy right here, it's random what he chooses to do. Sometimes he'll investigate over here, other times he'll go into the room right in front of me. And also, you have to make sure that when you're going for this guy, if he does decide to come over here, that you check your right. The amount of times I've been spotted by an enemy who's been patrolling over there is a lot. But he's dead, and all I'm going to do right now is wait for the enemies to get over here. I'm going to use the lore mechanic to my advantage, which is practically suicide on grounded difficulty, because the enemies see you so fast that you never really get a chance to put them into an investigative state. And I'm amazed that worked just then. But I guess if you're at long distance, it doesn't seem to queue the alert status that quickly. Although I highly doubt this lore mechanic is going to be very effective for the final encounter of the game with the Rattlers. Because that encounter was already bad enough on survivor difficulty because of how awkward the designs were for the Rattler section. But when grounded difficulty has just made the enemies a lot more aware of your presence, and they see you in about a split second a lot of the times, I really question how the final Rattler encounter is going to progress on grounded difficulty, and I'm not looking forward to it, because that encounter has some really weird problems. But as you saw just then with the second guy, I was able to do the corner kill method against him, and I'm amazed that worked. And I wasn't even to his side or behind him, I was in front of him, but because I touched him, it gave me the prompt to do the stealth kill against him. And I was also very lucky that he didn't go into the corner transition animation, because oftentimes when the enemies go into the corner transition animation and they spot you, they never seem to get cancelled out of the animation, aside from rare instances where they do flinch, and I don't know how to consistently trigger it. I mean, I highly doubt it's going to matter in the long run, because you're not really finding any kind of situations where you need to use the corner kill method, because you already have different ways of isolating the enemies and not having to put yourself in a position where you need to do that. And also, by the way, the moment this guy turns to the right, you need to immediately use the dive to prone method, because if you do that, you will not run the gamut with the turning animation that he could potentially do. And then wait for this guy to move back over to the left, make sure he's not looking at you, and then get all the way up here. This method works the same as in my Survivor difficulty walkthrough. It works just as well, only you have to be a little bit quicker on certain things, and there is a moment where you have to jump across to the other platform that woman over there is using, but there's another woman directly below her who is walking, and if she does a turning animation, and she is looking in a direction where you're supposed to jump, I don't really see how you can get over to this platform very quickly. You have to get to this other platform quickly before the woman who's on the same level as you decides to turn around and spot you. So I get very lucky, and now I'm just going to make my move over here. I need to go prone so that I'm reducing as much of my visual profile as possible so that the guy behind me doesn't see me. I'm going to go on this side so that he doesn't fully detect me. And then I'm going to go into the crouch position right here. I'm also going to use the dive to prone method, but I was afraid that I would just get a moment where that woman would hear me, even though I doubt that would have been the case. I'm going to pick up the wrench here, and here's the crossbow bolt, here's some hunting pistol ammo, and then we have this stalker encounter, which is incredibly easy. The stalker encounters like this are incredibly simple, because running past them is so effective. So that is the end of this sequence. Got it done in seconds, and now we have this encounter, which I was able to do on the first try, and I did not get screwed by bullcrap like I did in my Survivor difficulty walkthrough. And the bullcrap that I'm referring to in this section right here is there's a moment where you're supposed to jump over a gap, but there's a clicker to your left. And there are times when the clicker can spot you as you're pulling yourself up from the ledge. I tried to hold circle during the animation, and it seemed to prevent the clicker from spotting me. So try to do that to ensure that the clicker doesn't spot you. But make sure you're prone so you can get past those stalkers that are just hiding in the walls. And come over here. The clicker is going to be to your left. There's the gap. I'm going to hold circle as I'm pulling myself up from the ledge. And I'm going to just remain prone at all times, just to ensure that the clicker doesn't spot me. I'm not using the dive to prone method, because I'm afraid of the possibility of a clicker spotting me. Something I should mention about the dive to prone method, if you are crouched and you do the dive to prone method, you sprint for a split second, but that split second is all the enemies need to spot you. So always make sure that you're prone before doing the dive to prone method so that you're not going into the sprint animation and generating that small fraction of noise that will allow the enemies to spot you. And it's not like I can use the dive to prone method here because there's so much geometry in the way that even when I'm not close to the geometry, I'm just going to get moments where Abby will go to the left or right when I'm doing the dive to prone method, as I demonstrated in the ship area of Seattle Day 1 for Abby's section. And all I'm going to do right here is I'm going to remain prone. I'm going to keep track of the awareness indicator. I assumed originally that when the clickers did that animation that they're doing where they're just kind of getting startled, that would indicate when you're supposed to actually stop. But it turns out that it isn't perfectly in sync with the awareness indicator, so don't rely on that animation. Just rely on the awareness indicator. It's a lot more honest with when you're supposed to stop. And the rest of this is incredibly easy, because there's only one moment where a stalker is inside of a wall, and he's very easy to get past, because all you have to do is just remain prone. There's no other enemy. I might as well just skip to the next sequence. And you might also notice that I skipped the area where the flamethrower spawns. That's because the flamethrower actually appears before the next big stealth encounter, so there's no point in going into that room. As we'll see right here, the flamethrower is right over here. And I got this encounter on the first try. And it's exactly the same as my Survivor difficulty walkthrough, only I'm only going to fire my crossbow once. I'm not going to use 3 crossbow bolts. I think on grounded difficulty, you can't recover your arrows from the enemies. And the reason why I assume this is because if you remember, in the very first encounter of this video, I fired a crossbow bolt at an enemy's head, but I didn't get it back. And then I fired my crossbow bolt at this clicker, and nothing happened. And normally, on Survivor difficulty, 1 out of those 2 shots would guarantee that the arrow wouldn't break. But considering that it didn't happen, I assume they've removed the durability system on your arrows, so you won't be able to recover them once you use them. So you need to be even more conservative with your arrows. Not that it's a problem, because I'm almost certain that in Seattle Day 3 of Abby section, they'll give you back a lot of crossbow bolts. And all that's doing is just allowing me to conserve my crossbow bolts even more when the durability system isn't that reliable on grounded difficulty. So I think I'll have plenty of crossbow bolts necessary for Seattle Day 3, seeing as how I'm being even more conservative with my crossbow bolts. And I think that's the whole intention of this particular modifier. It's to make you save your crossbow bolts for Seattle Day 3, because the crossbow is very reliable in Seattle Day 3, because the enemies are fighting each other, and you have to remain in a stealth profile at all times. But skipping on ahead, we now have this encounter right here, and it's very simple, but one thing you gotta bear in mind is you need to make sure that that door is closed. You have to make sure that door is closed right there, so that when you use the distraction and you throw it into this room, the clickers are going to run into the room rather than just doing their echolocation, because they only do the echolocation if the distraction is in their field of view. If it's not in their field of view, they will run towards the location, but you have to make sure that you get away from the door you're near, because that clicker tends to run near you, and he will spot you very quickly on grounded difficulty if you're anywhere close to him. We're now about to move on to the Rat King boss fight, and this is a boss fight that has been affected by grounded difficulty in a very positive way, because he dies even faster than before. And you're not going to really understand how quickly he dies until I get into the second phase. But you'll notice that when I'm shooting this guy with a semi-automatic rifle, like, Abby does her quote for, like, that thing's not going to stop a lot quicker than usual, which means that he has less health. And I think that is a really good design choice. This is exactly what I'm expecting from grounded difficulty, and I wish this mentality was applied to the other encounters, but it isn't. This guy didn't drag out for a long time on Survivor difficulty. He still died very fast, but the fact that he dies even faster than before means that the developers respect his lethality, they respect what it means for a player to actually utilize their weaponry to their full degrees. Like, this is actually respecting what it means to save your ammunition so much, and on grounded difficulty, you don't get a lot of ammo, so I guess they took that into account when designing this guy for grounded difficulty, because you're not getting a lot of ammo, thanks to the fact that they've taken away a lot of static ammo drops, and the enemies don't drop ammo very frequently. They decided to decrease this guy's health, and it makes this fight even more balanced. I mean, he's already a balanced boss enemy, because he doesn't have a lot of bullcrap, and he only mainly does 2 attacks, his charge attack and his acid attack, and they're all very easy to avoid. And right now, I am trying to pick up some ammunition, but I'm eventually going to pick up some hunting pistol ammo because it actually spawns in one of the crates, because the ammo constantly respawns in this fight, and I'm going to put him into the next phase, and this is where you're really going to understand just how powerful you are in this fight, thanks to the kind of modifiers they put for this fight on grounded difficulty. And who knows, maybe this isn't part of grounded difficulty, maybe this is part of the patch, but I'd prefer it more if it was part of grounded difficulty. But watch this, 38 flamethrower fuel that I've already got by default thanks to picking up the flamethrower initially from the hotel area. And Abby has already said her quote for "I am not dying here," and when she says "I am not dying here," it means this guy is on his last legs. And this is the final blow right here. Watch this. Look at that. 20 seconds on the second phase. This was such a holy shit moment when I was doing this encounter. This was absolutely unbelievable. This has to be the most shocking moment ever in The Last of Us Part 2 for me. That right there is amazing, and before you leave, go around and pick up all the ammunition in this room. You're gonna need it for Haven when you are getting into the encounters with the Seraphites and the WLF. But that right there is a survival horror boss fight. It completely rewards saving your resources, and saving your resources is what survival horror is all about, so that you can do all these really amazing moments. It's practically no different to Resident Evil 4, when you were saving your ammo to do really cool moments with the bosses. Same case with Resident Evil 6 for the final boss of Leon's campaign. When you saved your incendiary grenades, you could do some really cool things against the final boss. And in Resident Evil 4, when you were saving your resources for Sadler, you could pretty much obliterate Sadler if you were saving your grenades so much, and they really felt like survival horror boss fights. And this is precisely why I go to survival horror, because anytime I am doing a boss fight or when I'm dealing with an enemy type, the tools you have and the mechanics in these kind of survival horror games feel so much more impressive compared to your typical third-person game. But skipping on ahead, we now have the encounter with the Evolved Stalker. And you might have noticed that compared to my Survivor difficulty walkthrough, I decided to use one of my weapons, which was the flamethrower. The reason for this is because I know that the flamethrower is going to be completely useless in Seattle Day 3. It has absolutely no utilities whatsoever in Seattle Day 3 because you already have a lot of other weaponry to perfectly accommodate for the situations you'll be encountering in Seattle Day 3. It's practically no different to the flamethrower's utility in the first Last of Us. Only in the first Last of Us, I never used the flamethrower whatsoever, because the flamethrower had absolutely no purpose in that game. It might as well not exist in the first Last of Us. At least in this game, they gave a justification for the flamethrower's existence, because the flamethrower is so powerful against the Rat King, and the fact that they made it even more powerful with this recent patch, and with the recent changes to grounded difficulty, they've just made the flamethrower even more spectacular, and it's just become one of my favorite weapons now for that particular encounter. But the strategy I use against this guy is exactly the same as in my Survivor difficulty walkthrough, where I'm not going to mash him down. I'm going to wait for him to come to me, dodge his first hit, attack him, and then watch whether he has hyper armor or not. He's not going to have hyper armor during this grab, of course, and he's not going to run away immediately. He kind of lingers on you a little bit before he decides to run away. It's best to try to attack him when he's in hyper armor. Do not try to use the prone trick against him. You want to only hit him when he's in hyper armor so that you're maximizing on damage. Because if you try hitting this guy when he's in a position where he's able to be flinched, there is a high possibility that he's going to push you away and then hit you with a counterattack that's almost impossible to avoid, where he throws one of his mycotoxic sacks at you, and the attack is so fast that you just can't avoid it. It's physically impossible because they don't want you to mash him down. They want you to be a lot more strategic with the way you're using your melee. And I think that is a really good design choice to punish spammers, because spammers are easily associated with the most ignorant of players. And he's dead! That is amazing. That right there was a really great boss fight, and I'm just going to take the time to pick up all the ammunition in this room, but this effectively concludes Seattle Day 2 for Abby's section. Stay tuned for the future parts. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.